Today we're going to look at graphing trig functions, and in particular the sine and cosine waves. And so before we look at this, you can kind of see what it's going to look like here. Let's understand why it's going to look like this. So let's take a peek at why the sine wave looks the way it does. So what I have here is a unit circle, and this point's going to rotate around the unit circle, and it's going to record the sine value. And the sine value, remember, is just the y value. So right now at 0 degrees, the sine value is 0. So as it moves around, the sine value is going to get greater until it gets to here, and then it's going to go back down, and then get lower and lower and lower, and then here it's going to start getting greater. So let's animate this and take a look and see what it's going to look like. So it's just recording this green line. The sine's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, 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 smaller. Now bigger, 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 bigger. You can see how it translates to the graph. So the sine wave starts at the origin, 0, 0, excuse me, and then it just goes up as it goes around the unit circle, and then goes down underneath 0, and then it just keeps repeating that pattern up and down. Okay, so this is the sine graph. Let's refresh this and look at the cosine graph. So cosine, remember, is just the x. So the x value here is 1. So cosine is going to start up at 1. And we'll animate this. And it starts at 1, and then it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and then it goes negative, gets really big negative, and then it stops at -1, and then it's going to get less negative, less negative, less negative, then bigger, 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 and so you can kind of see that it's getting bigger in the positive direction. Now it's going to get closer and closer to 0. Then it's going to go negative again. So it looks a lot like that sine wave, except it starts up at 1 instead of at 0, 0. So all it's doing is recording the x value as you move this point around the unit circle. Okay, so let's take a peek at these graphs here. The sine wave, here's an example of the sine wave. It starts at the origin, so some of the characteristics, it goes to the origin. It has an amplitude of 1, so from the peak, the top peak, to the bottom valley, that is 2, and the amplitude is halfway between the top and the bottom, the max and the min. So the amplitude is just 1 here. The period is 2 pi, so that means it starts at 0 and it does 1 full rotation of the sine wave in 2 pi. And so every 2 pi it's going to repeat itself here. The domain is all real numbers, so the x values could be anything. It's going to keep repeating in the x direction. So all x values are present here. And the range is just between -1 and +1. It never goes lower than this. It never goes greater than 1. Okay, so this is the sine wave. Let's take a peek at the cosine wave. We already looked at that. The cosine wave starts at 1. So it goes to the point 0, 1. That's one of the characteristics. And then it goes down. And then once it gets to pi, then it starts swooping up again. And at 2 pi, it's done 1 full cycle, and then it starts repeating itself again. So it has an amplitude of 1, just like the sine. It goes from 1 to -1. The amplitude is half of that. The period is 2 pi again. That's 1 full cycle is 2 pi. And if you are kind of fuzzy on this, this is the same as 360 degrees. And then the domain is once again all real numbers, and the range is the same. It's from -1 to 1. So this is the basics of graphing trig functions. On the next video we're going to say, well, how could we stretch this, compress it, shift it up, left, right, and all that stuff. So that's the end of this video.